What's up, everybody, and welcome back into the Play the Fights on College Football show, the Nebraska side of things. It's been a while since I talked to you. We've had a bye week. Before that, we matched up with Rutgers on Saturday. It was hot for a Saturday in October. It's 95 degrees, windy. Nebraska came away with a 14-7 win over the Scarlet Knights, moved them to 4-1, moved us to 5-1. And it feels good to be 5-1. It was time for a bye week. I'm glad we got it when we did, especially getting guys healthy. Tommy Hill expected to be back this week. Maybe not 100%. I mean, I couldn't really tell by Rhule's tone and his voice today really what he felt about Tommy Hill. But I gave you my thoughts on Rutgers via Twitter. If you don't follow me, you should throw me a follow at Parksy034 on X. All Huskers most of the time on there. Some college football sprinkled in there outside of Nebraska, but 95% of the time it is Nebraska. If you've never been a part of the show, welcome in. This is where we are going to preview and recap week to week in Nebraska football. Our previews focus upon the other teams. I feel like we talk enough about Nebraska, and you've already formed enough opinions for yourself that I just want to tell you about Indiana, what you can expect from them, what they're going to look like, little history in the matchups. We have a couple new segments tonight that we're trying out that we've had sent in from viewers that I appreciate. So we'll try those out tonight, but a bunch of new things moving around on the show. So hit the subscribe button if it's your first time here for everything Nebraska. We also do deep dives on Iowa and Iowa State. So if you have dumb friends that cheer for them like I do, shoot them a link. Let them check out our Iowa State show and Iowa show, as well as our Play the Fights on College Football show. Our general show covers G5 to Power 4 football week to week. Wednesday live shows at 6:30 Central. Give that a look. We're going to be able to break down Nebraska and Indiana, a big-time matchup on Big Noon Kickoff here this week on the main show, so you'll get to hear those other dumb fans' perspective on the game as well. It's a lot of good insight. So we appreciate you being here. So shout out to you. Also, shout out to our partner, No Rivals. It's a great hat brand, a premium hat brand with unique designs. They're dropping new teams by the day. They have a nice breast cancer hat out there that's donating money back to charity every time it's purchased. So give No Rivals a check out today. Use the code PTFS when you check out after you choose your hat for free shipping. We'll cover shipping for you. They're a great partner. Give those hats a look, and hopefully one day soon they'll have Nebraska. If everybody, I think, collectively goes on their teams tab, goes all the way down to the bottom and clicks request a team, I think if we all submit Nebraska, they have to do it at some point. So shout out to No Rivals. Check them out today. ShopNoRivals.com. All right. With that, we already recapped Rutgers, as I said, via Twitter. So let's go into Indiana. Everybody wants to talk about the Hoosiers. Obviously, it's a big-time matchup. Not a big-time football school, not a lot of success in their history. But in this matchup, they found success, which we'll break down because we're going to take a look at the series at a glance. We haven't matched up with them a ton over these two programs' existence, but they're off to the 6-0 start, and there's a lot of hype around this game. Big Noon kickoff. The entire Big Noon crew will do the pregame show in Bloomington, also at Memorial Stadium. We can call it Memorial Stadium Junior. I don't think enough people out there realize how many schools have their football stadium named after Memorial Stadium, but it's more than you think. This is one of them. It's a big-time matchup for Nebraska. Let's take a look at the series at a glance. This is one of those user-submitted ideas, so hopefully you learn something maybe that you didn't know. Indiana leads this series all time, 10-9. There's only been 19 matchups. I believe there's a couple in there that are ties. I don't count the ties. I don't think that ever should have been in existence. This is not soccer. Nebraska's won 4 of the last 5, though. Most previously, the 2022 matchup everybody's all familiar with, the 35-21 Casey Thompson days, the Trey Palmer days. That was the last time these two teams have matched up. So no matchup in 2023, and now we get to see them in a ranked format in 2024. The two most successful head coaches in this battle all time, Tom Osborne for Nebraska, which I feel like could be the answer for the majority of these. But Tom Osborne had a good stint against them. He won every game from 1975 to 1978, and they played every year. All of those wins came over head coach Lee Corso. So shout out Lee Corso in College Game Day, but Tom owns you. Looking back on the Indiana side, they beat Nebraska 7 straight times, which obviously is the majority of their wins because they had 10 total in the series. Those 7 times came from 1941 to 1947, all from a coach named Alvin Bo McMillan, which is pictured on the left. Obviously, it's 1940s, so you're not going to know that off the top of your head, but that's kind of the overall look, head coaching-wise, over the two schools against each other. The last head coaches to win, we already talked about it, Mickey Joseph, Grambling head coach Mickey Joseph, and then Tom Allen on the opposite side. That was a 38-31 victory over, you guessed it, Scott Frost. So that is the series in a glance. Not a ton of matchups, not a ton of history between the two programs. Not a lot of success historically for Indiana as a program. I already mentioned that, but I can't stress it enough. Go to there's a great site out there called Winsipedia where it kind of matches up the program by program. Nebraska dominates every single category. Indiana does not have one over the Huskers. So with that, let's move on. Let's go into their team and their offense to start. But before we do that, we got to talk about their head coach. They have a new head coach this year. It's a program that struggled defensively tremendously over the past few years. Looking for new leadership, they found a good one in Curt Cignetti. But before we do that, let's look at their schedule. They come in 6-0, obviously first place in the Big Ten, alongside Oregon. They beat FIU, Western Illinois, Charlotte, Maryland at home, and then on the road beat Northwestern and UCLA. Western Illinois, I know people are going to look at that, and I get it. It's a college football game. Give them credit where credit's due. But you're going to look at that and you're going to go, wow, 77 points. This offense is insane. I think you should look a couple more times into Western Illinois as a program and actively as a program right now about how bad they are. So put a little dash star next to that. It's kind of like if Nebraska went down the street and played like Nebraska Wesleyan. It's pretty close to that. But FIU, that's a good win at UCLA. That game was close for a while, but then they pulled away. Their offense is really, really good in the fourth quarter, which we'll go over. Charlotte, not a great program. Maryland, this game was close for majority of it. Last minute touchdowns. I believe they scored with 4 minutes left and one after that as well in the game to make that look like it was a further game than it was. Northwestern 41-24 last week. That was pretty close midway through the third quarter as well. But they've really pulled away and done a nice job in the fourth quarter finishing ball games. So it's important for Nebraska this week to not let them do that because we haven't really done that on our own except for Purdue. And last week they weren't too bad in the fourth quarter, or 2 weeks ago, sorry. Looking at their head coach, Curt Cignetti, everybody's heard about this name. He's a winner. I know he's told people that he's a winner. He said, Google me, look me up if you don't know me. I win, that's what I do. And he's not wrong. James Madison, in his time at James Madison, he was 52-9, 19-4 between 2022 and 2023. Before that, he was at the University of Penn, Pennsylvania, just the statesmen, the Quakers. And then he went to Elon after that. And in his total time as a head coach, he's 119-35. That's a 7.73 winning clip. Obviously, a very good coach who wins a lot of the places he goes, and he has not been anywhere where it's easy to win, I would say, and he's still done so. So credit to him. It's a guy who can turn around a program and make a program into a winning one pretty quickly. So 6-0 start. That's the look in their head coach. Let's start with their offense. Obviously, their offense, everything leads through the quarterback. But before we look at that, let's talk about their overall rankings. 9th overall offense in college football per yards per game. 96% in the red zone scoring offense. They get down in the red zone, they're coming away with points. Their kicker's perfect on the year. Only kicked 4 field goals, 39 for 39 on extra points. But those 4 field goals all have come within 40 yards. They do tend to go for it a lot. It's a very aggressive offense. And when you have very aggressive offenses, you kind of get those aggressive scores that we've seen from Indiana this year where they're consistently putting up 40 points or more. 12th passing offense overall yards per game wise and 45th rushing offense yards per game wise. So obviously the emphasis is on the pass, but it kind of works both ways because a lot of their passes are set up off of looks at the line of scrimmage, which we'll get into when it comes to their offense. At quarterback, if you haven't heard of this name, you probably heard of him by now because he's off to a splendid start for undefeated Indiana. Curtis Rourke, the Ohio transfer, stands at 6'5", 220 pounds. He is a big one for a quarterback. 118 for 160. It's a 73% completion rate this year. Over 1,700 yards already, 14 scores and 2 picks. Both of those picks came against Maryland and very early in the game. It was this pretty rainy game. If you haven't been in the show before, just know I go back and I watch every single game, including the Western Illinois game, which is why I made those comments. But he threw a couple picks against Maryland, both of them on the first 2 drives of Indiana, I believe, based off the highlights. One was overthrown deep ball, and the second one was just pretty much a misread where he threw it into a guy. He thought he had space. He did not. Defender jumped it, made a good play on it. But then he kind of settled in after that, and their offense got rolling as they do in most games. Looking at Rourke overall, he's experienced. He's decisive. He really puts emphasis, or this offense does. He fits well into the scheme because of the short routes that they create. Everything's kind of nickel and diming down the field. They want to go 3 yards here, 4 yards here. A lot of it is set up off the RPO. I'll get to that in my final points of their offense overall, but it's a lot of RPO. I would say 85 to 90% of the time, it's got a run pass option look to it. And that's every play. Not often you're going to find them running between the tackles. He's got great pocket awareness. Not a guy who's going to run a ton. He has the ability to scramble out, but he's not going to run downfield for a ton of yards. But he's really aware in the pocket. He knows when to get out, when to escape. But when you're a sixth-year quarterback and you spent 5 years at a different school and you've gotten a bunch of looks and then you're coming into this, that's a ton of game experience for him. And he was really good at Ohio in 2022. He had a season that jumped off the charts. I mean, he had over 3,200 yards that season, and that was a good Ohio team, and they competed well on the MAC throughout his career there. That's really what I got on Curtis Rourke. He's going to be serviceable. He's not going to be the game changer. He just kind of gets the ball out quick enough, and he has enough experience that he puts his team in good situations to win. But he looks really good overall. He's kind of had that Luke Altmaier start where this is what Indiana needed to kind of have an offense that's consistent since Michael Penix. Moving on to the running backs. This was a requested format as well. Somebody wanted to say, let's compare our backs versus their backs. And I like that because our backs are pretty good and we have a deep room. Indiana has a couple of really good backs that stand out, and those are kind of their go-to guys that are split even on the carries, as you can see. But let's take a look at first leading off our side, Dowdell and Emmett Johnson. Those are the two I listed out. I know Ramir's up there and statistically, but these are the two statistical leaders as we stand. Emmett, I think, is going to take more of our running back one role throughout the season. I know they like Dowdell and his physicality, but their stats are fine. They're not going to jump off the page. They're kind of similar Dowdell-wise to Indiana's backs. Emmett Johnson didn't really get a lot of love early in the year. It was more of an RJ and Dowdell split. I think that will change throughout the season from what we've seen from Emmett. He's a really, really good player. On their side of things, Justice Ellison, number 6, he's a senior, stands at 5'9", 210. He's at the top. 64 carries, 409 yards, 6 touchdowns. Their touchdowns, I get it. You're going to be like, man, they score a lot of touchdowns. Well, when you put up 77 in a game, you kind of spread those out. And then they put up 40 consistently. I don't know if they faced a defense like Nebraska yet, though, especially these running backs. They have not seen a defensive front like Nebraska has. And it's going to be a little bit of adjustment for Cignetti's offense and what they want to do. But Ellison's good. Obviously a bowling ball build. He's going to be explosive, downhill game. Not a ton of jukes in him. He's going to more run through you. He's physical, good leg drive. I think when you look at him, he's going to be the main carrier, but Lawton makes the difference. And we'll get to Lawton, but he's not going to be the guy that's going to get 20 more carries than the other side of things. They're pretty evenly split in each game, and they kind of have fresh legs out there all times, which is an emphasis for Nebraska's defense again, is kind of getting that front line switched out so we can have fresh D linemen against fresh legs because they do a pretty even split on their end. On the other side, Tyson Lawton, he's a good back too. Same size, 5'9", 210. So a couple of bowling balls, shorter guys that are pretty explosive through the hole. 5'9" is not the tiniest in the world when it comes to running backs, but it's down there for Big Ten football. He is physical as well. He gets downhill a little bit better than Justice does. You're gonna see him outside of the tackle. More of those preset T formation, pistol set, downhill runs. I think they like Lawton in that look, and that's kind of what I expect on Saturday. Is for them to try and get outside of the tackle a lot because of how good Nebraska's interior defensive line has been. So another point of emphasis, set the edge well and let him go in on Ty and Nash and let those guys make tackles because they've been great at it all year long. That's what I see in the backfield. Let's move on to the wide receivers. The wide receivers are pretty good. They're a big part of this offense because of the RPO looks that I mentioned. But I'm telling you, I can't emphasize enough how much of the RPO means to this school and this scheme. I mean, every single down and highlight that you see, it's a delayed, kind of slow-paced Wake Forest look to where he'll pull it out and hit a slant or hit an out quickly if you give him any sort of room. It's quick. But they don't get sacked a ton on the offense because of their offensive line is pretty good. It's not like outstanding because they get the ball out so quick. It's hard to tell if they're really good, but they're big. They're physical. They get downfield really well on the offensive line. But these wide receivers are a big part as well. Let's talk about two of them. Let's talk about Elijah Surratt, 6'2", really good receiver, 29 receptions, 513 yards, and 2 scores. He's pictured on the left. This is a James Madison transfer, which they have plenty of with Cignetti coming from James Madison. He really is the leading receiver because he's kind of the main read in all of these RPO looks where he gets a lot of the slants, the ins right away. and he'll be a part of the game on Saturday for sure because it makes up a majority of what they want to do. On the other side, Omar Cooper, this is an Indiana through and through guy. He is a 6-foot sophomore, 18 receptions, 375 yards, and 3 scores this year. He's really their go-to guy when they find one-on-one coverage. They take a lot of downfield shots towards him. If they see one-on-one, he's going to take a 2-step drop and throw it up. They really want to see if he can win these 50-50 balls, and he's done it really well throughout this season. This is where I kind of see the matchup for Sierra Wright. I think this is kind of the emphasis that Nebraska's defense wants to put on. I'm interested to see the looks we get this week. If Tommy's back, if maybe Buford drops back to safety with Gifford, or if he moves into the jack position, because what we've seen from Sierra, it's really hard to say, yep, take the back seat again, because Tommy's back and Buford's been splendid, which he really hasn't been all that good enough like Wright has been since he's come into that full-time role. So I'm interested to see kind of what the defensive alignment looks like on the Nebraska side of things this week as well. One guy I want to mention that's not pictured for the wide receiving core, Donovan McCulley. Look for him in the slot in this matchup. They've kind of utilized him here and there throughout the season, but the size matchup is what interests me. Malcolm Hartzog's been guarding the slot a lot for this Nebraska defense and has gotten beat at times on out routes. Donovan McCulley stands at 6'5". Hartzog, I think on the high end, is 6 foot. So I'll be interested to kind of see what that matchup looks like. I think this is where they're going to go to pretty consistently throughout their time in the game. With that, looking at their offense in general, no picture here, but they're productive offense. They move the ball well. They consistently get down the field. They hold the ball well. They're not in a massive hurry, but they're not a slow team that's going to run the play clock down to 1 every time because they have so much talent and they want to get down the field and score. The tempo is a little back and forth there. They can get going if they need to. They're going to require some press coverage. This is not something Nebraska's been great at this year. They've had their time struggling throughout the season with that, but I think this is going to be the game where they really need to step up in a few spots. Linebackers need to stay home on assignments because if you try and run gap fill too quickly with this offense, you're going to get burned on that RPO look, especially if you have that sag off defensive back look and Bullock maybe rushes the gap, or Stephon Thompson or MJ Sherman maybe immediately goes to the gap. That's when they are going to pull it. They're going to find Surratt. They're going to find their other receivers, and they're going to beat you down the field pretty quickly. Rourke likes to go over the middle. He's not scared one bit to do so. The middle of the field is important, just as I just mentioned. He likes to throw down the middle. He's not scared to do it. It's not a ton of sideline routes. They don't do a lot of comeback routes. A lot of it is based, if you give him time in the pocket, which he's gotten this year, only been sacked 3 times. All 3 of those came against Maryland. It's like I spoke on, that good offensive line. But if you give him time, he will kill you over the middle. Nickel and diming, very important, which I mentioned way earlier. But with that RPO looks comes a lot of short, quick throws, 6-7 yards at a time. That sets up 2-3 yard runs, which is why their offense is where it is, yards per game and rushing, and where it is passing is they're going to get 7-8 yards a pop via the pass if you don't respect them on defense and make some plays. With all that said, I know I've probably scared you with what I've said about their offense and all the statistics I've given you. I think it's defendable. I really do. Where Nebraska is by far, and it's not groundbreaking to say this, but Nebraska is by far the best defense this team has faced all year. And it probably will be for a while because Indiana, I mean, you look at Maryland, Northwestern, none of these teams, UCLA is at the bottom of the barrel. This is a tough test. This is really their first test against an opponent that could take them down. So I'll be interested to see how these guys respond when Nebraska's defense makes a few stops that maybe they haven't experienced throughout the season. With that, let's go into the defense. Defense can be a little bit shorter because I think everybody knows more interested in the offensive side of things on Indiana because of the way they've been scoring points. But on that defense, let's highlight 2 guys, both of them JMU transfers, as you would expect with Cignetti. But Aiden Fisher, one of the best players in the Big Ten on the defensive side of the ball this far, and he was one of the best players in the Sun Belt Conference a year ago. 100 total tackles for James Madison last year. He hasn't slowed down one bit for Indiana. 21 solo tackles, a sack and a half, and he's just kind of the leader of this defense. It runs through him. Cignetti's staff really trust this guy. He knows what they're trying to do, and he's been really, really good at the start of this season and making this Indiana defense serviceable enough to let their high-powered offense win them games. Overall, looking at their defense, 11th in the country and yards per game. It's maybe a swayed stat. I mean, Maryland had their way a few times. Northwestern put up 24 points, pretty easily. So they've had their gaps when it comes to pretty good opponents, but like when you give up 3 points in a football game where you put up 77 and you give up 7 when you play FIU, like, yeah, those stats are going to be a little swayed, but I'm really excited to see this team against a pretty good Big Ten team in Nebraska as the moment stands. It's going to be a fun test to see if that defense is for real, the offense is for real. I really thought Maryland was going to be their test, but Maryland showed no signs of life as they've lost to Northwestern last week. So it'll be interesting to see this defensive group against a talented young freshman and a couple of big receivers in Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks. On the other side, this is the matchup I want to highlight, not the guy you're probably going to hear about the most when it comes to previews around the country, but D'Angelo Pons. This is a sophomore. Like I said, he's from James Madison. He stands at 5'9". He's a defensive back at 170 pounds, 18 solo tackles, 5 pass breakups this year. He's a good player. However, Maryland had their way with him a little bit with Caden Prather down the sideline. Caden Prather obviously is a good receiver. We saw him last year in Maryland's matchup with Nebraska. Big, long, lengthy guy. Well, here's the good news. We have 2 and debatably 3, if you want to include the tight end, very big, long, lengthy guys in Isaiah Nair, Jamal Banks, and Thomas Fidone. Those guys can really take advantage of this matchup, and I like Carter Nelson in the slot too against him if that lineup happens. He's a good player. He's just a little undersized for what he's about to face in those two wide receivers that I just told you about. So I'm excited for those matchups. I really think that's where Nebraska is going to take their 1 or 2 deep shots throughout the game, is right at Pons just because of the size matchup. Let Naor, let Banks be physical, get the ball in the air, let him make a play. I think Nebraska can find success in doing that. Overall, in their defense, they mix and disguise look pretty similar to Illinois. They're high flying, efforts high. They're constantly gang tackling, but they don't get a ton of consistent pressure. They do have 19 sacks on the year. That number sounds extremely high. Like 8 of them came against Western Illinois. That's fine. I don't want to sway the stats because 11 is still pretty good if you want to just not include those 8, but still, it's going to be a good test, and I think it's a good opportunity for Nebraska's offensive line to take a step forward. Catula's got a couple of games under his belt right now. Evans has been good this year. Ben Scott has been hit or miss a little bit. I like to see him step up this week. But I really do think Nebraska wins the line of scrimmage when it comes to our offense versus their defense for sure, because their defensive line wasn't imposing their will against Maryland. I mean, Billy Edwards Jr. had a few plays with a lot of time. Northwestern's backup, I'm blanking on the name right now, had his way a few times when it came to time, but I think Dylan's pocket awareness needs to take a step forward like we all want to see. It's a 4-2-5 base with elite linebackers. Not only did I know we talked about Aiden Fisher, but not only that, they have another guy on the other side that's equally as good. So they get really good linebacker play with only 2 of them out there. 4 down linemen most of the times, but they will disguise those looks, bring a DB here and there because their defensive backs do have a few sacks listed on the season. It's going to be an interesting matchup. We'll see what Satterfield's going to scheme up. He's been pretty good throughout the year. I really haven't had a ton of complaints when it comes to the Satterfield department. But with that, before we go to the score prediction, I want to remind you, if it's your first time here, I'm about to give you a score prediction. I've been right a majority of the time this year. I believe I'm 5-1 as well. Drop a score prediction below. If you get it right, if you hit it on the nose, I'll send you a free No Rivals cap. I appreciate you being here. I can't say it enough. I put a ton of time and effort into these videos. So if you think I can improve them in any which way, drop a comment as well. If you love Nebraska football, if you love college football, hit the subscribe button. I can't remind you and thank you enough for being here, but also remind you that's the best way to support this channel and the work that we do. All right. Shop No Rivals. Use code PTFS at checkout. And with that, let's talk score prediction. I think Nebraska gets it done this week. After watching all the film and watching all the tape, I think Nebraska's seen tougher opponents. I think this is going to be a James Madison, a little bit of a shock for them. They haven't played anybody that jumps off the page. And I know people have talked about maybe they're overrated. No, what they've done and the talent they have at the skill position makes me think that they're in the right spot for what they've done to this point. So no, being ranked 18th or 17th or whatever it is on the AP poll, I know they're ranked 17th through the Play the Fight Song poll. I think they've earned that, but I think they haven't seen a defense like this. So it's hard to compare what they've done on offense to what they're about to face in Nebraska's top 10 defense, especially the interior defensive line, which I think can really shut down the run like they've done all year and get to the quarterback a few times. Rourke's only been sacked a few times. I think that changes. I think Nebraska can get it done. And yes, in a 1-score game, we won one last week, people, so don't give me all that. I got Nebraska winning this one 24-21 on the road in Bloomington, big noon kickoff. and Nebraska will be back in the top 25. That's just where I see it. I think it's going to be a slower paced game. I think Rhule is going to really emphasize keeping our offense on the field, those slow, methodical 7-8 minute drives, keeping their offense off the field, giving our defense suitable rest. I think whoever wins the turnover battle is going to find themselves in a very good spot. I think Nebraska has a couple opportunities with a scheme that maybe you can scheme well against. I'd like to see Tony White scheme a couple of picks on that RPO look this week. And I think Rourke will make his mistake in a big game. This is really their first big game of the year. I know Cignetti's a big culture guy, and he'll have them ready to go. But I'm excited for this matchup. I got Nebraska winning it. If you disagree with me, let me know below. If you think I'm wrong on Indiana, or if you're an Indiana fan and you have different thoughts, let me know below. It's a fan show, not with the media. Just want to spark a conversation and hopefully teach you a little bit about the Hoosiers before we go into their matchup in week 8. Excited for the matchup. Excited for you being here. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time. We'll catch up. We'll recap this game, and we'll preview Ohio State, which is also big noon kickoff. But we can't look ahead because it's a great opportunity for Nebraska to get bowl eligible this week. It's not pressure. It's just opportunity. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time. Go Big Red.